So 5,782. It's not divisible by 3. It's divisible only by 2. And it's a new year. And it's the year of Shemitah. And what exactly does this year have that can counteract what is going on around us? And my response to you is as follows. COVID causes people to think about consequences, indirect consequences to people that you ordinarily wouldn't worry about. People are masking themselves, people are quarantining themselves, people are taking extra care in order not to hurt another person. And because of this, entire communities, entire economies are being taken away, frozen. The consequences of this may be far greater, far worse than the pandemic itself. But so far, people have survived, economies have survived, economies have bounced back. Now they're going back into a quarantine mood. Apparently, there is a balance that's been struck, but we've learned to do things, to care about the consequences of what our actions are going to be to someone else. However, it's only because of COVID. It's not something that is really internalized. But what God has shown to us, and the events that have unfurled, that have developed, is that we as a society, we as a world, do not think about the consequences of our actions as to how far they can go to hurting our environment, hurting other people, or hurting the world in general. The calling cry of many women, perhaps the majority of women in this country, is that abortion should be a right, a basic human right, without thinking the consequences of what abortion actually is. Abortion is a murder. It's a murder of a life growing in somebody else's body, but it's the murder of a life. And the consequences of not caring about life, not caring about somebody else's life, because my life is more important, my body, it's my thing, it's my life is more important than the life of the fetus. I shouldn't be encumbered. When people put their lives as being more important than other people's lives, then you have not just a selfishness, but then you have a situation where we stop caring. We stop caring about others, we only care about ourselves. Say, no, how could that be? But that's the reality. The reality is, when we stop thinking about the consequences to others, and we only worry about the consequences for ourselves, which essentially is why we do abortions. We can have freedom, we can work, we don't have to be encumbered, we don't have to be bothered by some other life that's demanding food and water and clothing, care. I don't need to do this. So essentially, you're worried about yourself and not having to have responsibility for somebody else. But the consequences of such an attitude, consequences of pulling out of Afghanistan because you're tired, without realizing what the consequences would be as a result of you pulling out. So many millions of people are going to be in misery now, going to be horrifically brutalized by a backwoods group of religious fanatics because you have lost the will to do certain things, or you didn't do it properly. The same thing is true with the Iran deal, the Iran nuclear deal. The consequences of Iran being able to produce a nuclear bomb is not just going to be a deterrent or an act of violence against Israel, but it will put into danger not just Israel, but Saudi Arabia, and not just Saudi Arabia, but many other Arab states who do not wish to listen to Iran, and it also will put into danger Europe and the Western worlds, because the Iranians will use their weapons. And because they will use their weapons of mass destruction, they're not afraid of the consequences of using their weapons of mass destruction. This could be destructive to the American way of life as well. All of this indicates a lack of understanding and a lack of planning and a lack of realizing what consequences may come out. And therefore, that's why we have COVID, to teach us you have to worry about what will happen afterwards from your actions. Is there something that we can do to negate having to have COVID as a reminder? And the answer is Shemitah. Shemitah, leaving your fields fallow that everybody can come in and take the fruits, because you're not the owner, you're just a renter. God has given you a lease on the land that you have, but really it belongs to God and really belongs to everyone. The idea that you're not the only one in charge, you have to realize that there are other people involved, and your actions have an effect on others, a profound effect on others. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, came to Detroit in 1930. It was when the Depression began, and he was trying to raise money to establish a yeshiva to continue his holy work. And he came to Detroit, and there was a man by the name of Moshe Osnas, who was a very wealthy man, who knew the Lubavitcher Rebbe from Lubavitch. He was born in Lubavitch. And Moshe Osnas wanted that the Lubavitcher Rebbe should come and eat a meal by him. He wanted to house the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The interpreter, the one who translated the conversations of people for the Rebbe from Yiddish to English and English to Yiddish, was a man by the name of Izzy Starr. Izzy Starr was an attorney, whom I knew, a sharp attorney. But at the time he was a student, he was a law student in U of M, and he served as the Rebbe's translator. And so Max Osnas went to Izzy Starr and says, listen, I'll give the Rebbe $25,000. He'll come eat by me. $25,000 was an unheard of sum at that time because people lost everything in the Depression. So he went to the Rebbe's secretary, Chacher, and he says, Max Osnas is willing to give the Rebbe $25,000 for the yeshiva. The Rebbe will come eat by him. And Chacher, Begin said, no way. The Rebbe doesn't eat by private people. So he told him no dice, told Max Osnas no dice. Max said, I'll up the ante. I'll give him $100,000 if he'll come to my house and drink a glass of tea. How's that? $100,000. $100,000 in those days would have covered the entire deficit of the Lubavitcher Rebbe with his schools and his outreach system for a decade. That's how much it was in those days. So he ran into, this time he didn't go to the secretary, he ran to see the Rebbe. And he says, Rebbe, Max Osnas is ready to give you $100,000 if you come to his house and drink a glass of tea. And the Rebbe thought for a moment and he said, I'm not going. And Izzy Star said he went out of his mind. He started yelling at the Rebbe. He says, Rebbe, why? The Rebbe needs money. And the Rebbe said, Izzy, he called him Itzala. Itzala, he said, you're a logical boy. Max Osnas is not the only one who knows me from Lubavitch. There are several dozen people in Detroit who remember me from Lubavitch. And many of them keep Shabbos. And I'm not sure that Max is one of them. What will the Shomer Shabbos, what will the person who keeps Shabbos say if I go to Max Osnas? We'll say like this. I keep Shabbos, Max doesn't keep Shabbos. The Rebbe, who did he visit? He visited Max. Why? Because of money. In other words, by the Rebbe, money is more important than keeping Shabbos. So the Rebbe said to Izzy, he said, it's all right. He says, better I should not get the money and not harm the Shabbos, the keeping of Shabbos of that other Jew. And the Rebbe never got the money and never changed his mind. Because you have to evaluate the consequences of your actions. Yes, the Rebbe would have had 10 years till he came back to this country in 1940. He would have had 10 years of financial stability. That's what he sacrificed. But 10 years of financial stability cannot be built on the keeping of Shabbos of another Jew. We have to realize the consequences of our actions. And if the consequences of our actions are destructive, then even though it may be beneficial to us, it's beneficial for a woman to not be tied down. It's beneficial for the United States to pull out of Afghanistan. But you also have to look at the consequences. The consequences, the heartlessness, the cruelty to other people's lives, the destruction of other people's lives have to be taken into consideration. Lubavitcher Rebbe would never have done that. And that's why we must learn Chassidus. Chassidus teaches that everything is from God, everything is godly, and every human being is made in the image of God. And we have to be careful of how our actions affect others. Because everything that God made is important. And every human being is of infinite importance. And every point on earth has incalculable value because God put it here. And so, my blessing for you is, we won't worry about COVID. We worry about our actions and how they affect others, starting with the Shemitah year. We give ourselves over to other people. We put ourselves second to other people. We're not number one. Number one is the godliness that's found within us, within all of us, the divinity that's found everywhere. And in that divinity, we are all equal. And therefore, everything that I do should be for your benefit, not just mine. Have a good and blessed year.